Great, fantastic. Ohayo gozaimasu. Good morning. I am honored to be the MC for such an illustrious group here. We're going to talk a little bit about unwavering strengths. There's a lot of discussion in the world about uncertainties. I think we can all ravel off the uncertainties, the things that we all worry about. But the one thing that has become an increasing certainty is the strengths and the multidimensionality of the relationship between Japan and the United States of America. So it really is a bastion of stability in this uncertain world. And to go a little bit deeper here, let's kick it off with you, Ambassador John. Since you were ambassador in Japan, could you sort of your personal impression how the U.S. Japan relationship over the last couple of years have sort of evolved? What do you see as sort of the primary highlights that have strengthened the relationships?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jesper. Hori-san, it's an honor to be here. We met very early on in my ambassadorship and became good friends, and it's amazing what you have accomplished, and so thank you for including me. The U.S. Japan relationship alliance has grown stronger and stronger and stronger. It's fascinating what I have seen in the decade since I was there. When I was the U.S. ambassador, I had 5 prime ministers in 4 years. 3 of them pushed back on the U.S.-Japan relationship, but I always believe that history builds on events and builds on each other. And I think what happened as a result of that is once the LDP and Prime Minister Abe came back into power, they, quote, learned their lessons and in the end realized the significance of the U.S.-Japan relationship. And as a result of that, for the last 10 years, there's been incredible momentum in building upon the achievements that began a decade ago. So I think that's one very fascinating thing. And one of the things I did was I went back and looked at Prime Minister Abe's speech to Congress in 2015, and then I compared it to Prime Minister Kishida's speech to Congress last week. And the strength of the relationship, as highlighted in their speeches, has gotten deeper and deeper and stronger and stronger. The second thing is, if I could take another minute, when I was in Japan, you had the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear crisis. And that was the first time that the U.S.-Japan alliance was really put to work on a humanitarian basis. But 2 things came out of that. Number one, a deep, deep respect between our 2 countries and, quite frankly, between our 2 militaries that got deeper and deeper. The other thing that came out of that was we learned how the alliance can work together. And what you saw last week was a whole array of proposals of deepening the alliance between the United States and Japan that, again, were built off of momentum that took place over the last 10 years. So I know we're going to get more into it, but that's my initial take.
But it's interesting, right, that you have, Japan also in its own right, having had, the 1990s, the early noughts, a period of difficulties, a period of very severe economic adjustment, and then sort of, ultimately, I guess it was the earthquake, the great Fukushima disaster that turned into a pivot point, right? Really pulling not just Japan together, getting new leadership, getting the economy starting to get back up going, but also that you've had this civil interaction and the military interaction to actually, aid things around. So a very, very natural almost progression of events that has come through. Now, Jane, you look fantastic. Thank you for joining us. one thing in the alliance, maybe the uncertain part, has become the United States of America. There's a lot of things going on. Your politics is extremely noisy, to say the least, about this. But from your perspective, tell us a little bit about, what you see developing on the ground here in the United States vis-a-vis the Japan relationship.
Happy to do that. First, though, I must thank my very good friend Yoshi Hori for inviting me yet again to participate in the opening panel. I did this in person at least once, but the last 2 times have been virtual, and I'm feeling extremely guilty because this time your conference is in my home state of California and I'm not there. I'm in Washington, but that will give me some insight to answer your question. I'm in Washington, so forgive me, but I care a lot. Yoshi promises I get a t-shirt, even if I haven't shown up in person. And I think that Yoshi brings outsized talent, not just to G1, but to everything else he does in Japan. If he hasn't told you about his rock concerts, he needs to. So, in answering your question, I was on CNN this morning at 6:45 Eastern Time, which is 3:45 your time. How many of you were up to watch me? I'm very hurt if you didn't see this program. But what I said was that it was an irony that today a trial is going on in New York City of our former president, and a trial is going on the floor of the House of Representatives of U.S. leadership. And that may be a little somber, but I do think, for a variety of reasons, that U.S. leadership is being sorely tested. The bright spot, and this is how I see it, is the U.S. Japan relationship, where I actually think both sides have made superb moves in the last period, and there is a bastion of stability between our countries. It's a good deal. I know we're going to go through the Kishida visit and all the rest of it. I thought that was a triumph. I seriously did, both for him and for President Biden. But P.S., just one other personal thing. John Roos, I'm outing you, John, was a supporter of at least one of my campaigns for Congress before he was so famous.
More than one.
More than one. Thank you, John. I would have lost if you hadn't helped me, so I'm trying to acknowledge this. Before you were so famous as the ambassador to Japan. So I just want to tell you people that there was a pre-John Roos, and he was really good. And the post-John Roos is even better. And thank you again, John, for all your help.
Great. Richard, now you look at the bigger picture, right? And you do so not just emotionally, but you actually do consistent polls. You focus a lot on the relationships of trust, between different institutions. Let's cast the net a little bit wider, going not just U.S. Japan, but a little bit broader globally. What are you seeing in terms of the big trends?
So there are 4 big trends, and then I'll go into Japan data. The first is the mass class divide. The top 25% and the bottom 25% have a fundamentally different appreciation of institutions. And it's really widened since the Great Recession. And it started off just in the US, UK, and France, and now it's become transversal, including Japan. The second is the battle for truth, which Jane is sitting in the epicenter, where it's very hard to decipher what is true and what isn't. Some of the consequences of this are fake news, but also misbehavior in the sense that health empowerment, meaning that I can do my own health care, people have a fake sense of security about what they believe to be true. And we've moved to thought bubbles, left and right. And then the third is a tremendous imbalance between institutions. It's best if you have business and government like kids in a park on a seesaw. Going up and down like this is terribly imbalanced now. For example, in the United States, you have a massive delta on competence between business and government. Business is much more trusted than government. That's an imbalance, structural imbalance. And then the fourth thing is we have people operating in a certain way where ideologies become identity. And so the extent of polarization again, this is not as much a Japanese problem as it is in the United States, but it's not just in the United States. This idea that, in fact, in our health barometer that we put out this morning, 50+% of people 18 to 34 in the United States say that I will not see a doctor unless he or she agrees with me politically. That's a farce, but it is so. I have the data. I can show you this. Because they think, oh, well, if this person's a Trumper, then of course, he'll believe in hydroxychloroquine or, whatever. So just to the point of the extent of politics intruding into life. Now, let me get to the Japan data. Japan, since Fukushima, has been the least trusting of its institutions of any country in the world. It continues so since 2012. And this is sad for me to tell you. Now, you have a new partner. It's called the United Kingdom. You're now tied with the Brits at the bottom of trust in institutions. But it's improved, but it hasn't improved enough to get out of the cellar. So you would be relegated out of the Premier League, given that you continue to lose. That's a bad joke for those of you who don't know soccer. Okay, so, yeah, but Jane got it. Now, business. This is important. Business in the last 5 years in Japan has risen in trust from 44 to 50%. Government has declined from 39 to 32. So the gap between business and government in Japan is now 18 points. It is very similar to the same gap that is in the United States. So this is a positive for business, but it comes with expectations. It means that people are going to expect more from business, that we'll want CEOs to speak up. This is not the Japanese way, as I well know. They just go do their business. If there's a void, business is expected to fill it. Now, a few more data points. Japan now has a serious mass class divide in terms of opinion. It's 16 points. It's not as wide as the United States, but you're up there with France and countries like this. Also important, the delta on trust in business between high income and low income is 22 points. The high income, 62, the low income, 40. So when I talk about the mass class divide of opinion, it's not just about business, it's also about government. The high income in Japan, 40% trust in government, which is not very high, 26% for low income. So the idea that government will do everything for us in Japan, the low income doesn't believe that. So again, it leaves the void and the expectation of business to do more. I have a few more data points. Trust and innovation. I have met a whole bunch of tech entrepreneurs here. You guys are all remaking the world. Let me tell you that in Japan, you have a problem. 2 out of 3 people say that tech innovation is being badly managed. 2 out of 3 think it's being badly managed. There is a 19-point gap between trust in tech, which is in the mid-50s, and trust in AI, which is about 30%. A 20-point delta, tech overall versus AI. People are suspicious of AI. They don't have any idea what it means for them. So pay attention. Implementation means just as much as innovation. Okay, a couple more data points. What is very high in Japan? Trust in my employer. 65%. So, again, when I talk about how trust has moved local, it is in my company, my CEO, and my company newsletter, more than in media in general. There is a fundamentally important point about business and climate. Everybody talks about the opportunity for Japanese companies in climate. Well, you have a problem at home. 75% of Japanese say your own companies are doing a poor job on sustainability. That's a big to-do. Brand Japan. You have always been proud that Brand Japan for, Nissan and Toyota and all this is leading the world. Well, you have a problem. Your brand peaked at 68% trust in 2019. Today it's 59%. You have especially low trust as brand in Korea and China. In the United States, you peaked in 2019 at 60%. You're at 50% today. You have a problem in the United States with women, with African Americans, and with young people. Otherwise, you'd be much higher. And if you wonder why the Biden administration has opposed the Nippon Steel deal, it's because they can, because the trust in Brand Japan makes it possible for them to do so and suck up to the steel workers and hurt American competitiveness. Jane, you'll have something to say about this, no doubt. But again, you understand the polling data makes it possible for politicians to make these plays. I hope that's useful.
Excellent. I mean, this was a lot of data here. We can all, digest all of that. You put out the elephant in the room, so let's start with this right away. I mean, so we've got this great relationship, but let's elaborate a little bit, John. The Nippon Steel, U.S. Steel thing. I can tell you from an analyst perspective, this makes perfect sense, right? That you've got collaboration there. This is an industry, where U.S. Japan collaboration can go a long way, where Japanese expertise management, is bound to raise productivity of American workers, but it's a political thing that has come through. How do we think about this?
It's a political thing that has come through. I mean, Jane would have more insight on this, but I think if this would have happened in a different year, not a presidential politics year, there would, in my view, there would have been a different result. From a U.S. Japan relationship point of view, there's no reason this deal shouldn't go through. I think the bottom line is politics. I'm a huge supporter of Biden. I disagree with this decision, but I understand it because in the end, he is all in for labor in the United States. It's a core of his support, and this was a labor issue. So I don't think it's any more complex than that, in my view.
Jane, you've been itching to come in.
Well, first of all, Richard's comments were very depressing, so I'm trying to recover. But I would say that the headquarters then of Toyota and Honda were in my congressional district in Torrance, California, for years and years. I think Toyota left. I'm not quite sure about Honda, but I was very proud of having Japanese manufacturers who employed Americans and did good works with, schools and needy populations in Torrance, California. I really was impressed with them, and the Toyota headquarters had a fabulous Japanese garden, and I spoke there many times. So let me say how much I valued trade with Japan. On this issue, it is depressing to me that protectionism is rising around the world. I get it that we want to save American jobs, but I frankly think there are other ways to save American jobs. And just yesterday, I went to a conversation between Christine Lagarde, who is the president of the European Central Bank, former head of the IMF, a dear friend of mine, and Mike Froman, who is head of the Council on Foreign Relations here. And I asked her the question about rising protectionism. Of course, you know what she said. She said free trade is a much better tool to promote competitiveness, innovation, employment, and ties among the democracies in the world. A much better buffer to China, as an example. And I agree with her. The other thing she said that should concern us is that protectionism also drives inflation. And that is not only a motivating factor for voters, but it is a real concern for the health of the U.S. economy.
Jane, just on that point, if I might, here's the negative circle that's going to happen. Biden's going to be blamed for inflation, and Trump is promising tariffs, and
Yeah.
you get the circle?
It's a vicious circle, and I was proud of being a free trader. Some of the labor unions didn't love me, a true confession, but I won it anyway, 9 terms in Congress. But they didn't love me because I was a free trader, and I am a free trader. And I think all of us agree on this. I don't know about the audience, but I think all of us agree that it is a healthier, better way to build a world in which people who have economic ties live in peace with each other. I mean, what is our ultimate goal? And Japan has been such, at least on this point, I mean, we can go into this trust thing, which frankly I find very surprising and concerning. But Japan has been such a, to me, in the areas I know, certainly automobiles, a wonderful ally. Another one I know, some of you may know, Harman Kardon, the storied audio brand. My husband was the Harman, And Harman was very active in Japan all the years. And a lot of the innovation at Harman came from that relationship and the ability to innovate together and sell great products around the world.
I mean, one of the ironies I had as ambassador and post-ambassador is I spent 4 years promoting free trade, trying to convince the Japanese leadership to embrace the TPP. Then it flipped, and the U.S. pulled out of the TPP when Trump came in, and Japan has, to Japan's incredible credit, has really been the driver of trying to keep the TPP alive.
No, and this is the interesting thing, right? I mean, that obviously when you look back over history, when Japan was a threat to the United States of America in the 1980s, right? There was protectionism, but it was a very different kind. You put in quotas, and with these quotas on cars, you actually enticed Japanese foreign direct investment. So you got the best of both worlds in the sense of that you actually got foreign direct investment, Japanese building factories here, you got workers hired by Japanese companies, and you ended up with the most productive car factories in the world being the Japan-run factories here in the United States of America. Why is it that today the reaction is a much more emotional one rather than the economically rational one? Is this just the fear of China overrunning America?
So my view is Japan's allowed itself to be lumped in with Asian manufacturers. And that's a mistake. There's a difference, but it's a difference that's only possible if you explain it. How much investment has been put in the U.S.? How much pay is given to Toyota and Nissan workers in factories? How much is contributed in sustainability and whatever? I think it's a real failure to take advantage of your obvious edge and slipping back into old behaviors. Americans are increasingly afraid of China. That is true. We're also afraid of our loss of relative position in the world. So it's an absolute and a relative. And how do you deal with fears? How do you deal with fears in any case? You talk to people, you explain to people, you bring them into discussions. Japan has failed to do that.
Can I give a little bright spot?
Sorry, am I depressing everybody?
Yes.
So
I'm trying to make them move, Jane.
I mean, this is an interesting message, but a bright spot is the technology industries, in my view, of Silicon Valley and Japan. It's absolutely incredible what is going on right now. When I came back from Japan, I started this venture fund to bridge Japan and Silicon Valley. I went around to all my buddies here in the Valley because my career had been here, and they said I was crazy. You know, the future is China. Why are you even thinking about Japan? I go, well, I wasn't the ambassador to China, I was the ambassador to Japan. But that has totally and completely flipped for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Japanese economy here has caught the attention of Silicon Valley and I would argue the United States, but you know, we're here in Silicon Valley. And the Warren Buffett effect of him going and investing in Japan has had a major influence along with the economic recovery that you're more qualified to comment on. The other thing, which is, you know, a too bad, but the geopolitical situation and the threat of China and the other geopolitical instabilities in the region, you know, the Taiwan situation, South China Sea, East China Sea, North Korea, the Ukrainian situation with Russia, has been a big wake-up call and has made Japan that much more important and critical. And we saw that in the summit last week. It was a huge advancement forward. If you haven't watched the Kishida speech before Congress, go watch it. It's a whole new defining moment for the U.S. Japan relationship. So I think there is, on the bright spot, a lot going on between our two countries, and particularly I see on a day-to-day basis the connections between that are really deepening between Silicon Valley and Japan. And we'll have to take advantage of that in development of AI and cybersecurity and climate and semiconductors and quantum. There's so many areas where we're going to have to take it to a new level. But I think what's going on, I would love to hear your view on this, is a real deepening and turning point in a very positive direction with regard to our relationship.
Can I add another dimension to this? As follows. I think I was announced as chair of the Commission on National Defense Strategy, which is a group of 8 of us, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, who are charged by Congress with evaluating the current national defense strategy, which was issued in 2022, really before Russia invaded Ukraine and obviously before Israel, Gaza, and the latest activity by Iran and a variety of other things. So what we have to say is pretty sobering. But I was in LA, then I was in Indo-Pacific Command with my group, and then we were in Japan for a day. Of course, I found time to have coffee with Yoshi. That's mandatory. But in Japan, we met with the then Minister of Defense and others. And what is fascinating is not only that Japan has changed its approach to defense and its defense doctrine, for which I commend Japan, but also Japan is very close to Taiwan, in case anyone missed the movie, and very concerned about a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and Japan's role in defending not just Japan, but the West. And there is so much more we could do together there. I'm not blaming Japan. I'm actually blaming the arcane regulations at the U.S. Pentagon, which kind of require ailing submarines and ships to be moved back to the United States to be repaired. I understand the point about jobs, but if we need them in theater to help win a possible war against China, that's crazy. Japan has the capacity to do co-production, repairs, co-inventions, innovations, and all kinds of stuff that would make this a positive sum game. And I just want to add one more word. I had John's depressing comment about the TPP and the decision by the last president to abandon it. TPP would have been another huge boost to the region and to the United States. It would have assured that we all set the rules for trade, not just trade. And all of the countries in the region, and at least at that point, including us, have China as our largest trading partner. And it was just, my view, boneheaded to drop the relationship, and really important that Japan picked up what was left and has rebuilt it into a trading regime in which, sadly, the U.S. is not a part.
Richard. So I think the mic, please.
I think sustainability is a real opportunity for Japan. I went last year, I talked to Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and 2 other companies. You guys are ahead in making your economy green, and the rest of the world is falling behind. I was at COP28. I mean, we've signed on to all these big goals. Japan should lead in the understanding, appreciation, and implementation of solar and wind and all these other things that are going to power the huge energy demands of cloud computing and of AI. Anyway, it's a place where you can make common cause and help America appreciate what's possible and depoliticize sustainability. Republicans by 40 points, Jane, don't faint, reject EVs. relative to Democrats. It's complete insanity that American freedom is being impinged by move to EVs. It's such a joke. But we can't politicize this stuff. Anyway, you have a way to calm America down about this stuff. It's a real way.
It's interesting, right? I mean, Japan sort of taking the lead. I mean, my favorite example at the moment is Kumamoto, right? Where, you know, the TSMC-Sony joint venture, normally it takes 36 months to build a semiconductor fab of that specification. Japan got it done in 22 months, right? You know, this coordination of actually when there is a policy decision, Japan actually follows through, and obviously both on the economic revival side, particularly with the strategic importance of semiconductors. The goal, I mean, I personally think that by 2030, Japan will control about 30% of the global semiconductor ecosystem, because the commitment is there now. The success stories are starting to be built, not just in Kumamoto, but now in Hokkaido as well. What about the United States in terms of the density of the relationship? Sometimes, and just to be cynical for 30 seconds, fine, Japan is going to double its defense spending. This is a strategic commitment that has been made. Bravo, exactly. But what is actually being done in terms of making sure that the doubling in defense spending makes Komatsu, I'm just using one example, a better company, that the relationship is not just one of Japan purchasing equipment, Patriot missiles, from the United States, but greater co-developments. How do you see that developing, John?
Well, I think an important point is, and I see this a lot, Japan has always been hesitant on because of Article 9 and doing too much in the defense area. In fact, it's interesting, when I run around Japan using the word defense, people tell me not to use that word. That security is a better word. And I think that, again, what we saw happening is a continuum of change from Abe to Kishida now, where I think Japan is, in my view, much more open to, I mean, loosening the export, you know, and so I'm hopeful that Japan will not be a second-class citizen in this. But if you listen to Kishida, he's talking about being shoulder to shoulder. And we have to be vigilant on that issue and try to continue to make sure that happens. You know, again, I remember 10 years ago, I was talking about an equal partnership between the United States and Japan, and everyone thought that was just talk. That, you know, but the thing that is also is very interesting to me is there is this concept now of a more equal partnership, but Kishida and the Japanese government has also said, we need the United States leadership. So, you know, there is this partnership, but the U.S. needs to lead. Yep. And we're all afraid that we're potentially on a track where the United States will no longer be the leader.
Well, this conversation is too depressing for me. I really, you know.
Jane,
we need sake or something. But seriously, looking at the result of the Kishida visit last week, I think the U.S., you know, even the U.S. Congress, it's hard for me to even say that, my former employer is getting the message that Japan is a huge ally. I see no actions in Congress other than perhaps the steel decision, which may be applauded by, you know, some in Congress, even if some of us disagree with it. But the visit had a number of deliverables. I'm reading here: expanded defense architecture with Australia, three-way military exercises with Britain, and a pathway to a joint U.S.-led coalition with Australia and New Zealand. The talk that I pick up is Australia and New Zealand are longtime allies, but among the the Indo-Pacific countries, Japan is the one we're going to count on. India is a little problematic, although it's in some of these arrangements, because India plays both sides, but Japan doesn't. So, I mean, I would like to see this as a good news story in this dreary conversation about all the problems we're having. Just saying.
I thought mine was a good news story.
I want you to take real comfort in the rise in trust in business. And I want you to take as a kind of, to think about, well, why is that? Business is ahead in Japan on trust of government because it's 40 points more competent at getting things done. And that's not traditional. This is really a change. And it's similar again to markets like the U.S. where business has been actually leading on sustainability, diversity and inclusion, not an issue for you, but geopolitics, even future of cities. So I hope that you, Dean Horry, think about what you're teaching your students about the responsibility of business in a society where the trust is given to the private sector, and that you need to consider not reacting but pushing for the things that you want. Better security, whatever else it is.
Let me add one more hopeful thing, just now that I'm trying to cheer myself up. And that is, another thing that was announced at this summit last week was that a Japanese astronaut will join the Artemis mission to the moon. First ever idea like that. And I think that is fabulous. Not only because the Artemis mission is a very hopeful sign that the U.S. is back in the space biz, but also that the first non-American, if that's the way to put it, that sounds a little off-putting, but anyway, will be someone who is Japanese. And it was a very good choice, I think.
Just to build on that, the space area is an incredible opportunity for collaboration between the U.S. and Japan. And I am seeing a lot of work being done both here in Silicon Valley and in Japan with regard to the whole area of space. So there are many of these opportunities.
Now, Jane, in your spirit, to lift things up a little bit, I mean, if you actually look at the data, right, the interaction and the density just of the economic and financial relationship between Japan and the United States has gone from strengths to super strengths. Japanese are the largest investors and owners of American companies. The GPIF alone is the single largest institution of ownership on Wall Street. So an incredibly dense relationship that you have there. Then you look at foreign direct investment. And the good news is, thank you, no. It's not just Toyota and Kians and Fanuc building new factories in the United States of America. It is actually Japanese companies for the first time in literally 30 years actually investing in Japan. And it's not just Microsoft putting $3 billion into some new cloud storage facilities. There is a plethora of small and medium-sized companies, of startup companies that have recognized that, you know what? Japan is cheap. You can hire a software engineer in Tokyo for about 30% less than no, it's not actually 1/3 of the price of a software engineer here in Silicon Valley. And trust me, the boys and girls from Keio University are perfectly fine software engineers. So you do actually have the engagement, particularly of entrepreneurs, coming through. And that's what I wanted to build on. In the spirit of G1, it's always to look forward, to not be critical, but to actually have constructive engagement. Now, to this panel, we've got a group here of entrepreneurs, of business leaders. What can we do to actually engage closer to make the U.S.-Japan relationship a closer and more dense one, and to make the world, as it were, a better place? Any suggestions? Richard, you're the trust guy.
Well, again, I hope that Japanese business takes the signal to accelerate its presence on issues that matter to the world. not just in the making of money, that's good, but making money through sustainability with windmills and other things where Japan can lead, wonderful. And even bagpipes. That was last night. But I actually also believe Japan somehow needs to give permission to its executives to even speak to media. I mean, it's like such a staged thing. Oh my God, we're going to talk to the media. Ooh, you know, it's way antediluvian. I mean, there's the Japan press corps and the Western press corps. This is so, yes, Mr. Head of Wall Street Journal. And it's a differential treatment. You've got to stop. Can't do that. It's one world.
I have a suggestion. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. But, you know, I believe the United States and Japan are the two most innovative countries in the world. I also have seen an incredible momentum of Japanese entrepreneurism. It's important for Japanese entrepreneurs when they're developing these incredible technologies to think from the very beginning to go global and include the United States, obviously, as the key market in that regard. I think that the world needs Japanese technology. The United States needs Japanese technology. I think the future is in these startups. Obviously, I'm biased in that regard. But I think bringing those technologies global from the very beginning would be a significant statement.
And I have a suggestion. I agree with those suggestions, and mine is more student exchanges. I was hearing recently that, I'm sure I have the numbers wrong, but there are maybe, you know, multi-thousands of Chinese students in our universities and 300 U.S. students in Chinese universities. I understand China doesn't make that easy, but Steve Schwartzman has built a Rhodes Scholar equivalent at Tsinghua University. It'd be much easier to promote student exchanges. I'm not saying there are none, but between the U.S. and Japan, and what comes out of that is ambassadors, both directions, for the other country, and then as those people, because they're all smart, become entrepreneurs, working together becomes a part of their muscle memory. So I think there are lots of positive things to come from all of these ideas, and I think that's a very good question. I would love to hear from people in the audience, at least before I have to get off, about, I don't know, what their questions are or what they're thinking about all this.
Jane, perfect segue. You know, one thing I think in terms of the student exchange, very, very important. I think also the human and engineering exchange, and the moment you set up a company, just build those bridges, right, across the Pacific, right from the very beginning. Build that bench of talent that can operate both in Japan as well as in the United States of America. Now, let me open the floor for any questions, you know, for Jane, Richard, and for John. Anybody here, please go ahead. If you very quickly state your name.
My name is David Mackman, and I'm fascinated by the yen-dollar rate. And just recently you said that you expected Japan to be 30% of the semiconductor industry, or control 30%. Will that be at 100 yen to the dollar, 50 yen to the dollar, or 300 yen to the dollar? And I only ask because if you're thinking about the long-term relationship, shouldn't there be some way to make that a little more predictable or manageable?
Oh God, this is the question that you know, you have to buy me a big bottle of wine, and we could talk forever about the exchange. For all intents and purposes, just a very quick answer, because that's not really the subject of the panel. You know, I think that the dollar is going to continue to be strong because the underlying American economy is going to be strong, and Japan will not have the wherewithal nor the need to actually step aggressively on the monetary policy brake. So interest rates in Japan will go up, but they're going to go up very slowly. And as a result of that, it's not absurd to forecast dollar-yen at 180, 195. Sorry, that was the CNN soundbite. Please.
Great, thank you. Simeon Bochev, an AI infrastructure entrepreneur. We spent a lot of time talking about the present, and I'd love to ask you, maybe in a similar vein, about the future. When we come together next year, so a year from now, I'd love just a quick answer from each of the panelists. Where do you expect us to be vis-a-vis more instability, less instability in the world? Yep. The strength or lack thereof of the relationship between U.S. and Japan, and what do you think is the primary driving factor of your answer? Is it the U.S. election? Is it some of the conflicts in the world, or something else?
Jane, take it away.
Oh, that's an easy question. Where do I expect us to be next year? I expect the U.S. Japan relationship to remain strong. It's a bulwark against all the rest of what's going wrong. I think there's a big question mark about U.S. leadership going forward. And I thought it was interesting that Kishida, when he spoke to Congress, warned against growing isolationism. I totally agree with that and said that the U.S. needs to have more confidence in its own leadership. But the big problem there is not, well, it is the race for president, but it is, at the moment, the U.S. Congress, which on the House side is incapable of doing anything. The rules were changed, I think most people in the audience know, to enable the former speaker to get elected. What they did was they took away all the power from the speaker. And the result of that is that it's virtually impossible to get anything done. And we'll see, it ain't over till it's over, to quote Yogi Berra. We'll see if this package of aid, which is essential for Taiwan, Ukraine, and Israel, actually passes on Saturday, and whether it passes in a form that's accessible to the Senate, and there is a way to put the bills together for Biden to sign so that we get equipment to these Ukrainians who are dying on the battlefield, and we show support for our democratic ally in the Middle East, Israel, hoping that Israel behaves responsibly. We haven't talked about that. But my point is that the U.S. is in a bad patch right now, and our leadership, certainly according to me, is absolutely essential in the world. The liberal world order that we helped to forge after World War II is in tatters. There is an evolving world order, and it is not just a Western world order. And we have to pay attention to the global South, and we certainly have to pay attention much more to our allies in the Indo-Pacific. So how that evolves in this bumpy year is questionable to me. So I'm hopeful that good, wise decisions are made, and that we do fund U.S. aid for these three places, and that we do show support for NATO, and that we do build on what is, to me, a very strong indication of alliances with Japan to defend the Indo-Pacific against any possible Chinese aggression in Taiwan.
I mean, I agree with everything Jane said. I will go a step further and say 1 year from now, Biden will have been reelected president, and the Democrats will have taken control of Congress, and we will be in a much better place. I need a bottle of wine with anyone to talk about that. If, God forbid, that doesn't happen, our relationship is going to be that much more important, because we are going to need the U.S.-Japan relationship, for all the reasons we've talked about, to be very strong. And both our institutions and our private sector are going to have to work very, very hard together to make sure that we come out the other side. But I don't think we're going to get there. So if we're talking 1 year from now, I think we're still going to have these incredibly difficult geopolitical challenges, but we will, as a country in the United States, be in a better place.
So we are 50 elections this year with 4 billion people going to the polls. Now, some of these are joke elections like Russia. Others are quasi elections, India. It's a real election, but Modi's going to win. We all know this. I think that the most important thing that you in this room can do is paint a future state that people can understand and appreciate their role in and feel comfortable in that world. Why am I saying this? Because in our studies, 85% of people are worried about losing their job to technology. And They don't know exactly why or what, but they're afraid of nuclear war. They're afraid of the pace of innovation. Calm people down. Make them understand. Edmund Burke wrote something about the French Revolution, and he said, we've destroyed the royal state, and we haven't explained to people what the next state is going to be. Can't have that. People don't like uncertainty. They like to know where they're going. And again, you in the room can tell people, this is what I saw someone with telemedicine this morning, wherever you are. Tell them what that promise is. Tell them that people in rural Japan are going to be served. Tell them the promise of your phone booths, that you can go in and actually talk about mental health, and show the excitement of what's possible instead of making them nervous and depressed about, oh my God, what is Trump or whoever going to do to us? We can actually control this future if we make people comfortable, calm people down.
I think that's incredibly important advice. In this world of increasing information overload, manipulation, you as leaders rising and showing a consistent line, sticking with a consistent narrative is absolutely imperative. I gave a presentation to the board of Microsoft recently in Tokyo, and if AI does replace 20-30% of the jobs, or does increase efficiency by 20-30%, tell people what they're going to do with that extra time that they have on their hand. That's the key story going forward. Additional questions, and I want to take...
Just one thing for you. Think about this. We have a rift growing between science and society. You guys, you entrepreneurs, you geniuses are running faster than society can keep up. You have to explain what you're doing and tell them where they're going to be okay. Sorry.
Which, by the way, just to harp on that, which is very interesting, the uptake of AI office solutions, the fastest region in the world is the regions of Japan, because they are desperate, because they have this labor shortage and they are dying to actually have these efficiency improvements. So it's embraced very, very fast with a very positive overall impact on the community and no fear, because they can see the positive results from that. Now, I'm going to take 2 or 3 questions in a batch. Hori-san, how can I deny you?
Okay. I have a question about Nippon Steel. And the acquisition of U.S. Steel has become politicized. Richard, you mentioned that brand Japan has become going down, and you said CEO has to speak up. How would you advise CEO of Nippon Steel to do in this regard?
Just keep that thought. Yes, you.
Hi. My name is Wataru Baba, the former head of the energy and the climate at Panasonic, and now an entrepreneur in that space, climate. So, John, you talked about the huge potential in space, and Richard, you talked about the advancement of Japan's leadership in the climate and sustainability, and Jen, you talked about NASA, who is now want to become the leader in climate, not only the current reputation of the space. Could you tell us a little bit about the huge potential intersection of the space and the climate and the energy in terms of the relationship between the U.S. and Japan?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, if I might respond first, only because I have to go, with apologies, everybody, and a special hug for Yoshi, and a request again for my T-shirt. There is a huge relationship between space and climate. In fact, the way we are going to monitor going forward, not just climate catastrophes, but climate improvements, is from space. I mean, we can see depletion of rainforests, we can see what drought does. There are going to be space tools, space-directed tools to fight wildfires, which is a new major climate disaster in the United States. There was just a huge problem in Texas, and we've had wildfires over and over again in California. So that's a great area of collaboration, and it meshes a lot of the conversation that we've already had. Just one last comment for me about space and defense, since that is one of my bags. And my former district in Los Angeles made, at the time, most of our intelligence satellites, most of them used for defense purposes. Now we can use them for many more things. The U.S. is the biggest user of space for defense purposes, and we are very vulnerable. And we better figure out how to leverage the technology of the private sector better than we have, because the private sector is making less expensive and more resilient and smaller satellites. And this is not just a U.S. opportunity. It's obviously a Japan opportunity, a U.S. Japan opportunity, and it can apply to climate uses too. I mean, the whole thing we learned in California back in the day after the Cold War, when we made the mistake of thinking the world, was now totally secure and we didn't have to worry about the rise of China, the rise of Russian grievance, or the rise of terrorism. The mistake we made was that we cut our budgets for defense and intelligence. Well, the triple PhDs who had won the Cold War were out in the cold. And one of the things we had to invent, and that did happen in California, I'm sure John remembers, was the notion of dual-use technology. You make the same satellite bus both for defense and commercial uses. And we've now mastered that. And so, I think this is a very promising field. I think this conversation is fabulous. And please forgive me if I click off in just a few minutes and listen to people smarter than I am answer that very good question.
The one thing, I agree with everything that Jane just said. The one thing I want to add from personal experiences, I was just in Japan traveling around talking to business leaders, and I was quite pleasantly surprised by the level of the number of questions and the level of commitment to the space area of the Japanese corporations. So I think it's going to be very important and a lot of opportunity between our two countries as that evolves. And yes, climate is a key part of the development of space.
So on Nippon Steel, I think the mistake that was made is to make this a Wall Street and Washington play. And it in fact should be a Gary, Indiana play, or where they have factories. Because the concern of the workers is, you see U.S. Steel has cut factory employment in Gary, Indiana by 80% because they've lost market share. And what they should say in Nippon Steel is, because of our special kind of steel and because of our technology and because of our capital, we can make you competitive for the Nissan contract, et cetera. The second thing I would do is I would for sure say, and look at how Nissan has changed Nashville or Bridgestone. These are good examples of Japan doing something important for companies and therefore for cities. And U.S. Steel could be important in Indiana and some of these other places.
Any final questions from the audience? Nobody here. Now, let me ask one final question. You mentioned about the brand Japan in the United States. What can we do to elevate, over and above the things that you've said, that obviously there needs to be more outspokenness, but anything that from a policy perspective that can be done or should be done to elevate the level of brand Japan here in America?
So your weakness for brand Japan is women, African Americans, and youth. With youth, it's because the spokespeople for Japan are Kishida and people my age. No bueno. Who's the K-pop operation? I don't know about Otani. I mean, is he good or not? I mean, he could be. I mean, but you have to have young people talk to young people.
Oh, you're getting into dangerous territory there.
I know he's good, but my point is he a good spokesman? Could he be, right? I mean, he could be great. I think. To young people, African Americans, they care about jobs and money. What are Japanese companies doing for them? And with women, what was the last Japanese woman, who comes over here as a figure from business? We need that. It's too male. They want to see rising women, and I'm sure there are so in Japan. Bring them over.
John?
Well, I have to change the subject a little bit because when Richard mentioned Otani, it brought back painful memories.
Why did he change teams?
No, what happened was I grew up in San Francisco, fanatic San Francisco Giants fan, and the president of the San Francisco Giants called me up when he was first making his decision on the U.S. team. Larry Bear.
I was with him yesterday. It's so funny.
I grew up next door to him. But in any event, I said, sure, anything I can do to help get Otani. And I taped a message to him. They played it to Otani. Unfortunately, I didn't see his reaction, but I heard the verdict. And the verdict was he went to the Los Angeles Angels, and then, or the Anaheim Angels, and then recently, as you know, went to the LA Dodgers. I am still in complete pain as a result of that decision.
So is Larry Bear. Team.
Great, thank you very much. We had a lot to cover. John, thank you. Richard, thank you, Richard.